Today we're talking more about the fields effect and how to plant a field, acknowledging the fact that we are all a field to be planted by God, not only planted, but also cultivated, and all of that with an expectation of bringing a harvest. I have observed over the years that people who have planted, tended, contended, and waited for long periods of time sometimes lose touch with the fact that the whole thing started with the expectation of a good result. The same thing is true in the development of your life as a leader. We've acknowledged that we're lifelong leaders if we're going to go the distance with our development as a great leader in the earth, wherever God has positioned us. We've acknowledged the fact that we want to take responsibility for our leadership development in a very intentional way. We've talked about safeguards that need to be put in place so that we are truly in progress as the development of our leadership goes through a lifetime. It's not something that just happens by any certain age, but it's adapting a mindset that we're going to be able to carry with us until the day we see Jesus. You know, I long to see the day, or the face of Jesus in that day when I hope I hear something like this. It might be real official. I'd love it to be like what Jesus heard about, well done, good and faithful servant. But I kind of think it might be more like something where he looks at me and says, girl, he says, you didn't leave anything, any stone unturned I had for you to look under, or any endeavor unattempted. And you may have knocked a few things over on the way. I'm notorious for spilling my coffee and knocking things down and not very careful. When I go through, I'm kind of like a bull in a china closet. But I have a fond memory about that. One of my staff members in the past, I was real exciting actually, telling him about a new project. And as we were going down the hall, and I was saying, we're going to get this new learning management system. We're going to be able to put all these records in there. We're going to be able to have all these online courses. So I'm like driving it, because I'm so excited about it. He's backing up, listening. And as we're doing this, there are all these pictures on the walls, like those team development pictures that you've seen a million times. And as we're going by, I'm knocking every one of them, and they're swaying on the wall. And so as we're going, he just listens and puts his hand out and stops that picture. And so, I just think when the Lord calls me home to glory, he's going to say, girl, you did it with all your heart. You knocked a few things off the wall, but you tried everything I had for you to enter into. And I would rather do that and not having done it all perfectly than to leave things unexplored that are endeavors that God invites us into. Why? I'm expecting a harvest. I'm expecting fruit. I'm expecting results from the things that I am doing, because if not, why do them? So let's look at some definitions of a harvest, some synonyms, you might say. We began this discussion not so long ago with a description of what an effect is, something along the line of a cause and an effect. You take these actions, you get these results, you do these things, you expect certain consequences. We do this all the time. We're thinking, if I do this, this will happen, and we try to mitigate damage. We try to anticipate plan A, plan B, plan C. We try to be sure that we're ready to bring the desired result. But often in the development of a life, we get a little weary along the way and forget that we started this whole thing to expect a desired end, a particular result. And for the purposes of our discussion, we'll say a harvest. So we're looking to have a consequence emerge from the choices we're making right now. The things that you're deciding as you study your leadership, as you put together your leadership portfolio, the decisions you make about your life now will have an impact on what's going to occur in a month, in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. With the passing of time, a crop is matured, and there will be a time where there's a yield. There is something to be harvested. There's financial reward from obtaining more education and pursuing a particular career, or growing a business, or putting a patent in motion, or bringing a product to market. There are returns we're looking for. There are rewards that God loves to give that are a result of a field planted, a field cultivated, and a field ready for harvest. There's something that's produced. What is it? Is it a product? Is it development of other people? Is it books you're writing? Is it music you're producing? Is it prayers you're praying to bring a particular change in the earth? We pray because we expect an answer. We expect a result. We work. We go to school. We develop because we want a particular consequence, a particular yield, a particular thing that is produced. One of my favorite ideas along this line is producing results in the lives of other people. As the builder of a high-performance team, I was thrilled to watch results produced in the lives of folks who might not have considered themselves leadership material when they joined my team. We were in a very high-pressure situation where we had a lot of work to do, and we worked a lot of hours. We had many obstacles to overcome. We were wildly successful from the very beginning, and frankly encountered some political fallout from that in our particular situation. And it's the kind of thing that grieved me because I wanted everybody to understand what we were really doing, and that's one of the things that is difficult when people can't understand what you're doing, when people can't rightly understand it. And so that's kind of a whole other subject for another talk. But in that season, I realized I had to just focus in on the people in front of me that I had responsibility for, develop them into top-notch leaders, and work with what I had. You know, you've got to work with what you have in your hand. And as I did that, I watched people rise to new heights of team leadership, of solving problems, of putting on our best face in front of our clients who had very demanding expectations, and we pulled it off. You know, it was hard work. It was a lot of prayer. It was blood, sweat, and tears. And yet in all of it, the friendships that emerged have become lifelong friendships. One of the people that I hired into the team, one of my very first hires, was a woman by the name of Linda. Short little redhead, spunky, great enthusiasm and great attitude, and had never done anything like this, but she had the spirit for it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you hire the attitude and the spirit and then train the skills. And this gal, there was no stopping her. And she did incredible things. And as we brought in new training contracts and secured partnerships with country clubs and people around the area, we'd filled all the facilities we had access to and needed more. She was kind of on the front edge of that. She didn't wait for me to ask her to do that. That's where her husband played golf. She went out there to talk to them, said, these would be great training rooms. How about you work with us? And she came back and said, I have us a new facility 20 miles away, and it was gorgeous, and started a whole new level of partnership. Now, her term was some clerical term in terms of her job title. Should she have been out getting those partnerships? Well, you bet, because she flowed in her power alley, is what I like to call it. She had skills of communication. She knew how to spot a need. She knew how to identify a gap, and there was nothing stopping her from going to fill it. Now that's the sign of a good leader in the making. Someone who's not sitting around tapping their foot, waiting to be dawned with some new level of authority. They're going for it with everything they have within them at the moment. And what ensued over the years that I want to refer to here, we produced some great training programs. We produced a lot of revenue. We produced great curriculum. We changed the lives of companies and of professionals in those companies. That was all valid transformation in a community. And it was something God honored, God blessed, and God greatly, I think, took great pleasure over. What came as a side benefit were these lifelong relationships. And the young lady that I'm talking about rose to leadership in our team and several other departments in the years to come. And through that time, I became personal friends with her husband as well. And not so long ago, as I was on a visit to that area again, I got on the phone with her to just see how she was doing and found out that her husband was actually on his deathbed. And I said, I'm on the highway that passes by your addition right now. And she said, well, I'm on that highway too from the other direction. Meet me at the house. Bill would love to see you. And so I got to enter the lives of these people at a very crucial time. We'd also been privileged to help Bill find the Lord years before that. And it gave him so much comfort to talk to me again because I'd been with him in that encounter, and to recount what his salvation was all about and how secure he was and his being able to go in peace at this juncture, bringing him to the end of his life on this earth. And it was precious. It was a precious exchange that was something God just ordained in time and with the history of our relationship. I tell that story because for each and every one of us, wherever God has placed us, there are life-changing exchanges waiting to be had. And they don't have to be weird, I always say. They're very natural, they're very powerful, and they're ways that people's lives are changed. When I think of consequence and yield and produce, when I think of a return, or here's a word, fruitage, you might say, I see the faces of the people I've been privileged to lead in my staff over the years, who I know have been developed and launched, and who I have a place to speak into their lives. They have a place to speak into my life because of the history of our leadership development together. Here's an interesting word, ingathering, or collecting the harvest, another synonym for harvest. What are we bringing in with our leadership? It is the product, it is the finances, but it's always so much more. The word transformation, the big word, sometimes it's so big sounding we think we don't have anything to do with it. But I beg to differ. I want you to consider that you are actually a transforming agent in the earth. God is divinely positioned to make a difference wherever God has assigned you, so that you can collect a harvest and you can change things. As we think about this, just meditate on it a minute together. I have a story I want to tell you that I think beautifully illustrates this. You know, we've defined a harvest as the result, the fruit, the things that's coming in. And yes, it's the widgets that you make, but it's so much more. There's something in what you do that makes life better for other people. And think of that as transformation. The hostile customer walking in that you're able to calm, the person who's agitated about something that lands at your desk, where you're able to hear them and help them find a solution. It may be software that you're programming that makes something run more efficiently. All of this is holy work offered unto God. I saw a very beautiful and powerful display of this just a couple of years ago, as I found myself in a very tender place in our lives where we realized my brother was very ill. This is my little brother, the one I've told you about, baptizing in the pool when I was 7 and he was 4, till he saw the light. But he loved Jesus much and was a very talented musician, and was about to be diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. Now, we didn't know what was wrong. We knew something was terribly wrong. And we had him in a wheelchair because he had become very weakened in his physical condition. And in this little story here, we had planned a trip together. And this had been something we had talked about on the phone for months. And through a lot of other extenuating circumstances, we weren't able to take this trip till a particular time late in the year. So it's that time. We come to his apartment. We haven't seen each other in a few months. And when he comes to the door of the apartment, I'm very shocked because he has lost so much ground and is so weak and has lost so much weight. And it was a very graphic moment as he opened the apartment door, and we just realized the seriousness of the situation. And everything in our minds, I say our, my husband was with me, told us we ought to get him to the emergency room. But he had been looking forward to this trip for months. And it's like in our spirits, we knew we were to take the trip. And so we did. And we put him in the back seat of our car. And his desire had been to go to San Antonio, South Texas, be on the Riverwalk, hear the mariachi bands, do the things that we loved to do when we were little, living in that area. And so what happened in the next few days was a very incredible point in life where the Lord highlighted so many things to us about the harvesting of a field or the harvesting of a crop. And he came alive as we reminisced and told stories of our childhood. We visited our childhood church. He rang the bell, pulled the rope in the vestibule like he used to do when we were little, and it was just a really, really precious one of those times where it's like God pushes pause and brings you into something that you know is just a holy series of days and moments, even though you can't quite reconcile it all in your mind. We knew God was up to something here in many ways. So as this trip had ended after 2 or 3 days and we began to think about how to get him some help physically, we ended up going to a very, very large hospital in Houston, Texas, and the waiting rooms were filled with literally hundreds of very sick people. So the weight in the room was almost paralyzing. The gravity of need, the pain that people were suffering, the hopelessness on their faces was very just debilitating, I'll say. And so my brother had never been able to navigate this medical system just because of his weakened condition to get help. And so here we were to help him, and I'm pushing his wheelchair, and I pushed it right up to the receptionist's desk. They took our name, and then we had to just fill out the basic paperwork. So I just can't explain to you the gravity of need in this place. It's just, there's not enough words or the right words to tell you what it felt like. But as I pushed my brother's wheelchair up to the desk of the receptionist, here's this woman who had been waiting on how many people that day? Hundreds of people in life and death situations, and piles of files on her desk. And as I pushed Dan's wheelchair up to her desk, she looked up from her papers and she locked eyes with him, and all of a sudden it's like he was the only person in the room. And she got this huge smile on her face, and she didn't know his name, and she said, "Hi, Lovey." She said, "What is your name?" And in the course of 30 seconds, she changed the atmosphere within 3 square feet of that desk and saw my brother. Now that is what I call transformation. A situation that was dark and dismal and hopeless and full of the tendency for panic was all of a sudden made a lot better because somebody brought a little transformation with the way she locked eyes with him and saw him as an individual and not number 349 at a point when he was about to receive probably the worst news of his life. And I tell that story because it made such a difference for him. I heard him later telling his friends on the phone, he said, "My sister got me in there and they called me right up to the front, and the receptionist, she called me Lovey." And, you know, he was seen. He felt seen. He felt helped. He felt known for a second, in this sea of humanity. And it was such a powerful example of how an individual who is, I'm sure that woman had a little prayer meeting that day on the way to work. And she was full of the Holy Spirit, and her countenance just dispelled the hopelessness. She infused hope with her look, with her words, with her gaze, with her intentionality. It was incredible. I tell it to you because your harvest that you're working to bring is a harvest on multiple dimensions. It's a harvest in terms of people's lives. It's a harvest in terms of financial yield. It's a harvest in terms of a return. And what I would like for you to think about is the fact that God wants us to bring a return. We get a few ideas sometimes that make us think we're not supposed to have finances. That bringing a return is not a good thing. Actually, the Bible tells us quite the opposite. In the parable of the talents, we see how the story unfolds. And at the end of the story, people said, I had 10, I've got 10 more. I've got 5, here's 5 more. And the Lord said, good, I'm going to put you over 10 cities. I'm going to put you over 5 cities. And the one guy who says, I just buried it. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. And he was banished from the kingdom. He did not work with what he had. So what are we saying? That everyone needs to be a millionaire? No. Maybe you should. I don't know. That's between you and God. But whatever God's put in your hand, you are to work with it to bring a return. If you're this receptionist I've just described to you, and maybe she didn't have much money, and maybe she'd been working there a long time, but what did she have available to work with? Her mouth, her eyes, her voice. And she brought a huge return that day in the life of my brother. There was a sowing and there was a reaping. Harvest time. We need to learn to expect it and look for it in little ways as well as large ways. Did you know you can leave a harvest in the field too long? There's a time for the crop to be harvested, right? And that's the time when you see all the combines out in the field, and it's ripe and it's ready and it's time to bring it in. And I think sometimes we leave the harvest that is ready in the field too long because we quit expecting it. We quit looking for it. We stop too soon. And I think that one of God's things on God's heart right now is to say, expect the harvest. Yes, you're laboring for a harvest. Don't quit looking for it, and understand how to look for it on multiple levels. Have you defined your produce? Have you defined what you're wanting to bring in? And there's a financial aspect, and there's a physical aspect, and there's a human relations aspect. And watch for the harvest. When we watch for the harvest, something really exciting starts happening in our hearts and minds, because we start thinking, you know what, if this comes in like I think it is, we've got to be ready to do what? Manage the harvest, manage the increase. And I'm going to encourage you to not wait for the increase before you get ready for the increase. Have you ever known of a business that grew too fast and they weren't ready, and then they could not service all their customers, and then they lost ground? You know, it's tragic. You're thinking, oh, they got the customers they were contending for. They got the projects. Talked to a gentleman the other day. He looked very stressed. I said, what's going on with your business? He said, well, man, he said, we're growing too fast. And he says, we're really in a precarious position, and we're not set up. Well, you know what happens to us? When we haven't seen the harvest by a certain time, all we're doing is looking for the seed to pop up. We're not thinking about what we're going to do when we've got fruit trees to pick and crops to harvest and finances to manage. And so I'm going to ask you now to say, God, when my harvest comes in, how shall I manage the increase? And it's not too early to right now begin upgrading your life and work systems to be ready for growth. How are you going to entertain the promotion you're getting? How are you going to carry it out? How are you going to be able to keep up if you're still operating like you're back here in the planting season and you're entering into harvest season and the combines aren't lined up and the things aren't in place to actually bring in the harvest? What are you going to do? Let your crop go bad? So upgrade your life systems, your work systems for growth. Your life systems have to do with how you carry yourself, how you live life, how you manage your time, how you do your work, how you keep up. You know, I've been doing a lot of development lately with leadership training resources and looking at leveraging content and making it available online and in new books and in new curriculums so that people can actually get what they're looking for as they're showing up. We've got to get our relationships in order as well. And our relationships have to do with our business relationships. We talk a lot about this next bullet, your inner circle or your home team, those who understand your business and what you're about. You need to have the right advisors, the right coaches in place, the right prayer team in place. You need a prayer plan and a strategy for interceding for the harvest that is coming. You need to nail your giving strategy. So when that happens, where are you giving? What are you supporting? And how are the finances flowing? Make the budget today for the increase you want to have in the next 3 years. So there's a responsibility we have to plant a field, to cultivate a field. And if we're expecting a harvest, which that's what this all started with, then we have to be in place, tooled up, ready to manage the increase. Managing the increase could be managing extra duties at work, managing your promotion, how you're going to carry yourself, what associations you need to be in, who you need to be learning from. Always be learning from those who are doing what you aspire to do. They may not be in your exact trade, but the way they carry themselves and carry out the work is how you want to lead. And so be lining things up so that you're ready to manage the increase. Now, as you do this, one of the risks in a rapid growth time or a time of harvest is that we can lose touch with either the original vision or with our clients. And so let's talk about knowing our clients. When we are in a season of harvest, it's a great time to keep touch with our customers, not lose touch just because we're busier and because there's increased demands on our time as well. Envision those you're serving. Develop profiles of your ideal clients. Find out what they want, what they don't want. Study the history of their relationship with you. One great way to do this is to create a focus group, and you can require or enlist external resources to help you with that. But this is invaluable advice. And what can be a risk factor when you're growing quickly or promoting quickly is that you lose touch with the one you're serving. That's a very dangerous mistake to make. And I know I continually do surveys asking people, what are you coming up against? What are you struggling with? What would you like to learn? And I keep these surveys and I study them and I pore over them and I think, what can I do to equip someone to be able to sustain? How can I help them develop the time management they need, the conflict resolution they're looking for, the leadership skills on every level? You know, there are core leadership skills we all need no matter what our profession is. There's a baseline of people skills and other strategic skills that are critical for any leader in any field. So testing your product routinely and getting data there so you can tweak your product depending on your customer needs is important. You don't want to find yourself one day thinking you're serving a customer of the past when times have changed. So we want to understand we are a field of God being developed for leadership to the next level. We're going to prepare the soil for the planting. We want to choose wisely the seed. We want to make sure we've expanded our capacity for a structure where the roots can go down deep so that we can sustain what is being developed in us now, so that in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years, we look back on this season as a baseline and that we're not still at the same starting point year after year after year. It's time for God's people and God's leaders to dig deep into the development of their own leadership so that they're positioned to withstand chaos, withstand storms of the economy, know who you are in God, and be so centered that you're one of the ones people are looking to help them do the very same thing. You see, what God's putting in you in this series of developing your field, it is for you, but it's not only for you. It's for those you serve and the leaders that you're developing all around you. I like to say we should all always be learning, and we should all always be teaching. So as you think about this, I would close by asking you to make sure you've identified those you want to learn from, and that you're also bringing along a protege or someone that comes along with you as one you're mentoring to learn what you're learning in the back room. It's time for men and women to step up the leadership quotient in the earth, embrace our destinies in God in every sphere of society, and bring transformation right where we are.